Picture this. You're sitting in a train carriage somewhere out in the English countryside, minding your own business, maybe halfway through a sandwich, when suddenly, the rest of the train just leaves. No emergency stop, no screeching brakes, nothing dramatic at all. Your carriage simply detaches itself from a moving express train, drifts gently toward the next station, while the rest of the train carries on at full speed without even slowing down. Sounds like something out of a cartoon. It wasn't. For nearly 100 years, this happened thousands of times a week, on purpose. Hi, my name is Richard, and this is Trains Explained. And today we're talking about one of the boldest and frankly slightly mad pieces of everyday railway engineering that was ever put into regular daily practice, something called the slip coach. What exactly is a slip coach? So what exactly is a slip coach? In simple terms, a slip coach, sometimes called a slip carriage, was a passenger car, or a small group of passenger cars, at the back of a train that could be uncoupled from the rest of that train while it was still moving. Once detached, the slipped portion would gradually slow down and roll into a station that the main train had no intention of stopping at. The main train, the one with the locomotive attached, simply carried on at full speed toward its next big stop, while the slipped carriage coasted in under its own momentum, using its own brakes, with its own guard in charge of the whole thing. Think about it from a scheduling point of view. If you're running an express train from, say, London to Exeter, you don't want to stop at every little market town along the way. Every stop costs you time, fuel, and momentum. And on a steam locomotive, getting back up to speed after a full stop is not exactly instant. It's more like trying to get a reluctant cat back into its carrier. But passengers in those small towns still wanted a service, and frankly still wanted to pay for tickets. So instead of stopping the whole train, the railway just dropped off the carriages those passengers were sitting in and let the big train keep going. It's a bit like a relay race, except instead of passing a baton, you're passing an entire train carriage full of people at speed and hoping everyone involved knows exactly what they're doing. Spoiler alert, they usually did. Usually. Where this all started? A bit of history. Now, where did this idea even come from? Slip coaches are almost entirely a British invention, and they go all the way back to the 1850s. The Victorian era was the golden age of railway expansion in Britain, and by this point, railway companies were competing fiercely with each other for speed, prestige, and bragging rights. Express trains became a marketing tool. The faster your train got from London to a major city, the more passengers, newspaper headlines, and general smugness your company got to enjoy. But here's the problem. Britain is absolutely covered in small towns and villages, and pretty much all of them wanted a railway connection, and all of them generated paying passengers. If your flagship express train stopped at every single one of these places, it wouldn't really be an express train anymore. It would just be a normal train wearing a fancier hat. The solution that emerged was the slip coach. The Great Western Railway, often just called the GWR, became especially famous for this practice. And honestly, if you're picturing a company that loved doing things its own slightly eccentric way, the GWR fits that description perfectly. They ran slip coaches on multiple routes for decades, detaching carriages at stations like Bicester, Westbury, and Banbury, while the main train sailed straight through without so much as tapping the brakes. Other British companies adopted the idea too: the London and North Western Railway, the Midland Railway, and several others. At its peak around the turn of the 20th century, there were dozens of slip coach workings happening every single day across the country. Outside of Britain, the practice never really caught on in quite the same way. A few other countries experimented with similar ideas here and there, but nowhere embraced it like the British did, which honestly tracks, because the British railway network has always had this strange combination of being incredibly dense and incredibly proud of doing things the complicated way. The mechanics. How do you even do this safely? Okay, so how on earth do you safely detach a train carriage while the whole thing is moving at 60 miles an hour? This is where it gets genuinely clever, so stick with me. The key piece of equipment was something called a slip coupling. Now, normal train carriages are connected together using a standard mechanical coupling, along with connections for the brake pipes. Because on most trains, every carriage needs to be linked into the same brake system, so that when the driver applies the brakes, the whole train slows down together as one unit. You obviously can't just yank two carriages apart while one of them is still hooked into the other one's brakes. That would end very badly, very quickly. So the slip coupling was designed specifically so that a guard riding inside the slipped carriage could release the mechanical coupling and disconnect the brake pipe connection at the exact same moment with a single action using one lever inside his own compartment. The moment he pulled that lever, the slipped portion of the train became completely independent, both mechanically and in terms of its braking system, from everything in front of it. But here's the really important part. The slipped carriage needed its own braking power, because once it's detached, nobody on the main train can help slow it down anymore, and the driver up front might not even glance back. So, the slip coach carried its own vacuum brake reservoir, essentially a built-in storage tank holding enough vacuum to operate the brakes independently for a short stretch of track. Once detached, the guard riding in that carriage would use this stored vacuum to gradually apply the brakes himself and bring the carriage to a smooth, controlled stop right at the platform. Timing was everything here, and I really do mean everything. The guard had to release the slip coupling at exactly the right point along the line, usually marked by special signs known as slip indicators or slip boards, so that the carriage had just enough leftover speed to coast all the way into the station and stop roughly where it needed to. Too early, and the carriage might run out of momentum before reaching the platform, leaving passengers stranded in the middle of nowhere. Too late, and well, you can probably guess where this is going. And just to make this whole thing even more impressive, the main train did not slow down for any of this, not even a little bit. The locomotive driver up front might not even register the exact moment the slip happened. The entire process was designed to be completely invisible from the front of the train. One moment you have a full-length express, the next moment it is slightly shorter, and somewhere behind it, a single carriage is quietly rolling itself into a station, like absolutely nothing unusual's going on. I genuinely think if you describe this to someone today who has never heard of it, they would assume you were making it up, or possibly that you had had one too many cups of tea. Why bother the logic behind slip coaches? So why go through all this trouble? Couldn't they just run a separate, smaller train to serve these little stations instead? Well, they did try that approach too, but it came with its own costs. Running an entirely separate train means another locomotive, another full crew, more fuel, more maintenance, and another slot squeezed into an already busy timetable. In the age of steam, locomotives were expensive to build, expensive to run, and needed a fair amount of manpower just to keep them moving at all. Every extra train you add to the network is another set of resources somebody has to find, fund, and maintain. The slip coach offered a clever middle ground. You get to serve the small station without the overhead of an entire extra train. You only need one extra guard riding along in the slip carriage rather than a whole second locomotive crew. The big express train barely loses any time at all because it never actually stops. It just gets a little lighter part way through the journey, which, if anything, makes it slightly easier for the locomotive to keep up its speed for the rest of the run. Free weight loss. Halfway through your trip, what is not to love? There is also a scheduling benefit that is easy to overlook. Express trains of this era were built around incredibly tight timetables, often designed specifically to beat the times of rival companies running similar routes. Every minute counted, especially on competitive lines like London to the southwest of England or London up to Scotland. A full stop at a station, even a fairly quick one, could cost several minutes once you factor in slowing down, stopping, loading and unloading passengers, and then accelerating back up to speed. On a heavy steam-hauled train, that acceleration phase alone could eat up a surprisingly large chunk of time. Slip coaches let railway companies skip all of that, while still technically offering a stopping service at that station. And from a passenger point of view, it was honestly a pretty good deal too. If you were heading to one of these smaller towns, you got to ride on the express train with all of its speed and comfort for most of your journey, and then you were simply dropped off. Gently, exactly where you needed to be, without ever feeling like you were stuck on some slower, lesser service. You basically got express class treatment on a branch line ticket. Not bad at all, honestly. The guard's job, skill, nerve, and a bit of madness. Now let's talk about the person actually making all of this happen. The guard riding in the slip coach. Because this might genuinely be one of the most underrated jobs in railway history, and I will go to my grave defending that opinion. This guard needed to know the route in incredible detail, and I mean every single inch of it. He needed to know exactly where the slip indicators were positioned along the line, how the gradient of the track changed on the approach to the station, how much the carriage would naturally slow down on its own due to friction and air resistance, and how all of that could shift depending on the weather, the load of the carriage that day, or even the direction of the wind on a particularly blustery afternoon. Once the coupling was released, the guard was completely on his own. No driver to help, no signal box giving him live instructions, just him, a brake handle, and years of built-up judgment on that exact stretch of track. He had to apply the brakes gradually, not too hard, not too soft, constantly judging the carriage's remaining speed against the remaining distance to the platform, all while the carriage rolled along with absolutely no locomotive attached to it. If he braked too hard, the carriage would stop short of the platform, somewhere awkward, leaving passengers to walk along the track or wait for assistance. If he didn't brake hard enough, the carriage could roll straight through the station, or in a worst-case scenario, run into something further down the line. Either outcome made for an extremely bad day at the office and an extremely awkward conversation with the station master. To put it bluntly, these guards were basically performing a manual, human-powered version of what modern trains now do automatically with computer-controlled braking systems. Every single day, multiple times a shift, with actual passengers sitting behind them, almost certainly with no idea how much skill was involved in getting them to their stop smoothly. There's something almost theatrical about the whole thing too. From the passenger seat inside the slip coach, the experience probably felt completely ordinary, just a regular train slowing down and arriving at a station like normal. They had no idea that somewhere up ahead, the rest of their train had already vanished into the distance, and that the only thing standing between them and a very long walk down the tracks was one guard with one lever and a lot of quiet confidence. I don't know about you, but I think these guards deserve a statue somewhere. Maybe a small one, at a station. Seems appropriate. Why it all stopped. So if slip coaches were so clever, why don't we see them anymore? A few reasons, and they all sort of stack on top of each other. The first big one is speed. As train speeds increased through the 20th century, the margin for error in a slip coach operation got smaller and smaller. Detaching a carriage and bringing it to a safe stop is a lot more forgiving at 50 miles an hour than it is at 80 or 90. The faster the main train was traveling, the more precise and the more risky the whole maneuver became, and railway companies grew increasingly uneasy about operations that depended so heavily on one person's judgment, with absolutely no backup if anything went wrong. The second reason is staffing and cost, which, let's be honest, comes up in basically every single one of these videos, doesn't it? After the Second World War, British Railways, like most railway operators around the world, came under huge pressure to cut costs and reduce staff numbers wherever possible. Slip coach operations required a dedicated, specially trained guard for every single slip working. Someone who knew that route, that station, and that carriage, inside and out. As labor costs rose and railways modernized, having a specialist whose entire job was to ride in one carriage and apply the brakes by feel started to look less like a clever efficiency trick and more like an expensive eccentricity. The third reason is that the alternatives simply got better. As diesel and electric locomotives replaced steam, acceleration and braking became faster and far more efficient. The time penalty for actually stopping a train at a small station shrank significantly compared to the steam era. Combine that with more frequent, lighter, multiple-unit trains, the kind that can stop and start quickly without a huge time penalty, and the core problem that slip coaches were designed to solve in the first place gradually started to disappear all on its own. There's also a simple cultural shift at play. Slip coach operations relied on a level of operational trust and informal local knowledge that became much harder to maintain as railways grew larger, more centralized, and more standardized. Modern safety regulations generally prefer systems that do not rely so heavily on one individual's split-second judgment, no matter how skilled that individual happens to be. The last regular slip coach services in Britain ran on the Great Western Railway, by then part of the nationalized British Railways, and the practice was finally phased out completely around 1960. After more than 100 years of carriages quietly detaching themselves from express trains and rolling into stations under their own steam. Quite literally, in some cases, the slip coach era came to an end. So there you have it, the strange, slightly chaotic, and honestly kind of brilliant world of slip coaches. It is one of those things that sounds completely absurd the first time you hear about it. A train carriage detaching itself while moving and rolling into a station all on its own. But once you look at the actual reasoning behind it, the timetables, the costs, the competition between rival companies, it makes a surprising amount of sense for the time it was used in. It is also a great reminder that a lot of the railway operations we take for granted today exist because someone, somewhere, had to solve a very specific problem using the technology and the rules of their own era. And sometimes those solutions look completely wild from where we are standing now. So what do you think? Would you have trusted a guard with one brake lever and a lot of confidence to get you safely into a station after being detached from your train at speed? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. This has been Trains Explained, and remember to subscribe for much more.